Hey guys, this is Kirob speaking, and today we are in Pro Cycling Manager 2023. The new version, that is. Yes, indeed. As you can see from the paint coat being different from last year's version. But what has changed under the hood? This is probably the first year in a little while that there are significant changes, at least from what it seems, to Pro Cyclist Mode. And as a bit of a veteran of Pro Cyclist Mode, I'm going to tell you, with my 60 minutes of available video time, what has changed in that mode. Here we go, and as per usual, we can select our base stats for the Pro Cyclist the way we did before. So far, so standard. Then, of course, we are selecting our team and generate the calendar. And this is where the new stuff starts. As you can see in the background already, there's your training schedule. And the training schedule seems to have changed UI and interactions. So first off, we have to choose how we want to be prepared. We can accept this, and we can choose, like in previous versions, this is not really new, we can choose between two different settings for the pre-season preparation. Either start with tiredness and a higher prep rating, or with lower tiredness and a lower prep rating. Alright, let's confirm this one and see what's going on then. We have to advance to the 2nd of January in order to start setting up the training. And this is where the first big question arises. What is this? Well, let's take a look. They didn't fit everything on one page, which is slightly annoying, but it is nonetheless rather functional in that you can just pull your different peaks onto this grid and also remove them by right-clicking on them. So unfortunately, you can't change their position once you have them placed, but you can simply remove them. There are two different kinds of targets or preparations, where you have a pre-peak area which has increased intensity, and then you also have your peak, which either is between 90 and 95 targeted fitness, or between 95 and 100. That, from my limited testing so far, and we're going to go much deeper than what I just did the previous hours, is not quite working as intended. Although you can see there's some interesting stuff happening here with the peaks getting shortened as you are cramming them into the already occupied areas of other fitness peaks. You can also make them wider if you want to. And you see that there is always a rest period after one of those peaks. There's a little number next to them, which shows you how many of these you can place. And of course, that means, no, there we can't place any anymore. It's all full. I don't know if this is really restrictive or not, because you have 3 main peaks that would be enough for 3 grand tours. So now, you might have noticed that this is just the general tab. There is a weekly tab, which is just equally as important. The weekly tab does hold some additional features that were indeed not part of previous versions, that are an actually new feature, because you could say that maybe this whole thing is just a visual change for how you place down your activities and so on, and there might not be an underlying change. We shall find out, by the way. But this here is definitely new. During the green areas here, you do have a certain number of slots that you can slot these things in. These things are currently untranslated strings, it looks like, but they are basically you being able to prep or train for a certain trait. And it's very straightforward. This is the tour trait, this is the mountain trait, this is time trial, flat, sprint, cobble, hilling, and baroudeur, I would assume. The system works as follows. In green, with the base level training skill, you have 4 slots available. That means you can slot 4 of the same in there, or 4 different ones. And as you are slotting them in there, you are gaining these percentages for these skills. And if you are leveling up, if you are above the threshold of 25% for a certain skill, you can choose that as your level up specialization for your pro cyclist. If you are beyond 75%, you can choose to up your potential in that one. One thing to point out is that these skills that you see here that have some percentages already in them very much depend on what you have chosen as your main specialization, and probably also the secondary one. In this case, I've chosen a pure Northern Classics expert, and he's getting 50% in, of course, Northern Classics, and also 20% in sprint, so we don't need to put in much effort to be leveling up in either a sprinter, and we have to put in no effort to level up as a Northern Classics guy. I think that is a really smart way of doing it, because it ties what you're actually doing in terms of training to what you then can improve on, which previously was not the case. Mr. Climber guy, who was out there in the mountains just grinding away, was then able to choose to upgrade himself to become a better cobble expert. Yeah, my ass. So that is no longer possible, unless you send them out and train them cobbles, and plenty of them. As you see, this is not quite linear, and as you are advancing weeks, you're actually losing 5% per week. But if you are plopping in this one again this week, if you have had it in the last one, you're gaining 10% instead of just 5. So this is the first week. Just follow along here. We plop 1 in. We go to the next one. We're back to 0. But if we use 1, we get to 10. And this is where it stays in terms of effectiveness. So prolonged training of these stats gives you the best progression. And you can, of course, place more of them in there. You will always only lose 5%. Overall, I quite like the system. To properly show you how the system works, what I'm going to do is a little bit of an analysis in a controlled environment, almost like a scientist. The setup is as follows. We are taking a new rider, save the save game in a different folder, make a backup of it, and then I'm just going to simulate with different setups for the training and the weekly progression, and just see where we end up in terms of fitness and tiredness, and hopefully draw some conclusions from that. First up is to leave everything empty. We are going to leave everything in the green as general preparation, and in the weekly schedule, I'm making sure to have absolutely nothing in there for this first run. With every run, we are going to have the same races, and I'm going to simulate them all. Simulation is actually really quick in this version of the game, which is much appreciated. It is looking like we are always going to level up on the first month tick, and that very first month tick I'm going to put into training. So far I've only implied what those kind of slotting mechanisms do for the training, but here you have it in action. We have not trained anything, and thus the only thing that we can choose as our specialization during the level up is our main one, which is in this case stage races. Also, because we didn't hit 75% in that category, we can't choose to evolve our potential in it. And there we drop 1 point into training. This is where I'm going to let it be, because the random results from the stage simulations will yield level ups at different points, so I don't want to mess up the science here. And there we have it, 5 months of simulation, without any kind of fitness training and without any kind of slotted items into the focus for the training. And it looks like this. So, one thing that we've already learned is that general preparation 75 to 85% doesn't mean that you end up with 75 to 85% fitness or preparedness, because that is hitting 100% well, effectively 95 there, and at the maximum 98% before the tiredness kicks in too hard. Tiredness also looks like it can't be cheesed anymore, like in previous versions of the game. You might remember that I basically showed you how to exploit it super hard in previous iterations, and it seems to be gone. At least, we think it is. Welcome back, it is Groundhog Day, and I've set up my training up to June to be only cobbles all the time, 4 slots, as you can see here. So now let's see how that changes our training curve. The benefits of training for Northern Classics is that you can level up in Northern Classics. And also, not to forget, put 1 point into training to keep everything else constant. The month of May has concluded and we made it to level 4 once again. And this time, we are an expert cobbler. We can evolve the potential as we have hit more than 75% within that specific skill focus. And the first results are in. As the solid lines, you see our baseline training, which was no specialization focus, nothing, just flat out only preparedness training. And the slightly transparent line you see is what happened when we added 4 points of focus per week. So, in conclusion, there's a slight difference in terms of fitness acquisition as well as tiredness. It is Groundhog Day, the 2nd of January. Today, we are going to find out what happens if we add one of those Target B fitness peaks, and not just 1, but 2, in a decent spacing, you would say. As we've already found out through the first comparison, we know that adding these items to their slots doesn't make a massive amount of difference, and it seems like a very useful thing to do during your career. And thus, I'm going to always fill them. One thing that you will notice then is that during the yellow period and the peak period, the number of slots is severely reduced, and also during the rest period where you have 0 slots available. So let's set it up. And just to show you as well, we have 4 slots in the green. Remember that this is dependent on your level of training skill as well. So we have 4 blocks here, or slots. We have 2 within the yellow, and we do have only 1 in the orange. And in the rest, as I mentioned, we have 0. Interesting, isn't it? So, this is pretty much what we expected. What we are seeing here is that during the green period, we have pretty much equivalence to our, well, just normal, straight up fill all the slots green training. One thing that we did not get is an actual fitness peak, as we know from previous iterations. Now, in this upcoming one, we are going to replace these in the exact same spots with red ones. But what more can we draw from this? Well, we see that we are roughly decaying by 16 to 20% when we are going into a clean rest week that is not interrupted by races or other activities. Also, we can see that the second one doesn't get nearly as high as the first one, because the first one had a lot more green general prep period before it. And now things are starting to look quite interesting. With these fitness peaks, I did do a little bit of a special thing here. There are no fitness peaks as in the previous year's versions, the older versions, where you could trigger a fitness peak and you get another +2 to your race day condition rolls. That seems to be gone, which I actually appreciate, because that wasn't a great mechanic. But what I've done differently for these, and you see there's basically no real big difference. For the first one, I have trained sprint very hard. For the second one, starting from this point onward, I have put in this special category, course, whatever that means. And now we know what it means, because you can see it right here. the increase in preparation is insane. So this one is to specifically increase your preparedness. So now that we are comparing the graphs, what I want to point out is we should compare the first half of these graphs to compare the effect of the A versus B target. And the second one, the run-up here, from this point to that point, we should compare in order to see the effect of this specific slotted item. Now on the second part you can really see the effect of this preparation for racing. And it just crosses over so incredibly fast there. It is a very powerful thing to use. So what I'm assuming here is that these additional ones that we have, which we currently can't use, are basically ones that will work in a similar way. They are not directly affecting your evolution of as a rider, but they are taking care of other problems, like healing and so on, and contract, or what is it called, brown nosing. And now that we have 2 more skill points remaining, I can show you what happens if you have training level 3. So now we're going to weekly, and you see that we have 5 slots available. And if we go to yellow, we have 3 slots available instead of 2. Anyway, that was quite illustrative. Now, one final check, and that is what happens if we move them really closely together. There are also some interesting things, which I assume are bugs, but you never know, maybe it's intended. Can build longer rests by pulling a B on an A. You see that? That's a little weird. I assume that's not intended, so it's probably gone for the release version. Take a look how I construct this one. I put an A fitness peak there. I place on top a B fitness peak, and now I can place another A fitness peak really close to the other one. That might be because there are 2 rest weeks here. And here we have the results from putting them real damn close. And even falling off a cliff in terms of preparation. That doesn't matter, as you can see. You can get up to 100% within 4 weeks from just about-ish 75%. So that's massive. This second one here is using specifically that booster in preparedness, the slottable one. And that really works wonders. As you can see, we're barely getting any tiredness here and back to 0 afterwards. I would say that with the system that is in place currently, it wouldn't hurt if you could manually place rest weeks. Let me state that differently. I think it would be wise for them to allow you to place rest weeks as well. At this point, I'm quite confident that we have explored what there is to explore so far, as these can't be used just yet. But let's conclude now. So from what we have seen, this new system seems to be working reasonably well. The only thing that seems to be missing from it is manually adding additional rest weeks. Maybe that could be addressed by having a slottable item that basically acts as an additional rest day. But otherwise, this new system seems to be very much not exploitable, unlike all the previous years, so I have to disappoint you. This, unfortunately, gets a thumbs up from me. And of course, I'm meaning the unfortunately jokingly, because that was a massive, bad aspect of all the fitness training that was in previous iterations of the game. And then there is the slotting mechanics itself. Very interesting. But first, a word from our sponsor. The Cyclist Tactics, the most action-packed cycling manager ever made. Can't win? That's because you suck. Here you find no bullshit RNG that you can blame it on. The Cyclist Tactics is now available for less and updated for free. Get the demo and see how bad your tactics really are. Link in description.
The Cyclist Tactics is not legally responsible for any headaches caused by overthinking moves, rider skilling, or resource management. Contact your physician if symptoms persist.
Okay. Well, so now let's talk about those slottables and why they are cool. With how these interact with different choices that you do have that also are beneficial to you, you have to carefully weigh how much of these do you want to put in. What I would like to see is to have an even larger effect of them on the tiredness buildup. That if you slot in too many, that you get more buildup of your tiredness. In general, the system seems to be quite interesting and working somewhat well. There are a few bugs I've encountered, but nothing that was game-breaking so far. Overall, I have to say that this version, and I've not just tested this, I've also played a fair amount, like half a season, roughly. Not simulated races, but actually raced it. And I had so far one soft lock in 10 hours of playing. That is way better a state the game seems to be in than usually, even though this system definitely isn't finished yet. And I do hope they finish it up for release. But yes, this system, very cool. I like it. Another thing we should talk about is the fitness peak, because fitness peaks have been removed. As in, the trigger has been removed that gives you a +2. So, what are these about? Well, you can then set, right now, you can set 2 weeks as the maximum without having anything in this. With this one, you can set the maximum to be 5 weeks. If that works or not, I don't know, because I have seen that during these times, and we've seen in these graphs, that during these times where you have the fitness peak, you lose fitness, which seems very counterintuitive as well. Unfortunately, the other skills are still as poorly balanced as they have ever been. And that has been the case for many, many, many years now. 4 or 5? When was this introduced? Like, that's a long time ago. And they were broken from the start and then never balanced. So yeah, that's still not good. But they did change the effects of the training, and the fitness peaks have been changed in the way that we just discussed, that you can place several weeks after each other. Such as this. That is, we can do this because we have 2. If we had another skill point in there, we could place a 3rd, and then a 4th, and then a 5th. So where does this leave us in regards to how to set your training schedule? Well, this is an early version and not release version, so take this with a bucket of salt. But it looks like it is quite beneficial to place a lot of them. And thus with nice rest weeks every 6-ish, 7-ish weeks, manage your general level of tiredness. If you wait longer than this, you get a significant amount of build-up, as we've seen with just the green training at the start to get the baseline, and that doesn't seem to be the proper way of doing it, unlike in previous versions where that was the overpowered way of doing it. No fitness peaks whatsoever, just leave it as base, and you get basically 100% fitness throughout the entire season, apart from the first 2 months. That was a little broken. I'm very glad they fixed it. And with that, I think we're done here. I hope this gave you a pretty in-depth insight into this new system in Pro Cycling Manager 2023. And I'm looking forward to launch. It seems to be good. Anyway, please check out the sponsor of this video, The Cyclist Tactics. And I hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next time.